Thanks for inviting me and allow me to talk about my work. I'm working together with, my name is Daniel Spiro. I'm working together with Johan Gars and Henrik Wachtmeister. So in the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we essentially decided to start working on thinking about energy economic warfare. So everything I'm going to say today is equally much thanks to them, except for the mistakes, of course, which are mine. All right. So essentially, our overarching question is how to design policy during energy economic warfare, and obviously applied to the current energy and economic warfare between the West and Russia. And our approach to that is based on very simple theoretical framework, or how we kind of organize our thoughts, is that during economic warfare more generally, what you want to do is to maximize your own income as usual, but you want to put the weight on the enemy's loss. So then you need to take into account the enemy's countermeasures to whatever you're doing. And you also need to remember that it's not just you that want to harm the enemy, but the enemy wants to harm you. So the enemy's decisions are going to be based on partly what harms you and partly what is good for the enemy directly. So I think this might help organize a little bit what's rational for Russia to do in some discussions. Things might seem not rational to do, but in war they would be. So that's kind of the theoretical starting point, and you're going to see some of these bullet points coming back. What we do in terms of methods is essentially that we take market data from the energy market and put it into very standard economic models to try to say what the effects are of various sanctions on Russia, but also on say, the EU and other countries. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the two main sanctions, so the import embargo of the EU and the price cap. So let's start with the import embargo. This is a schematic of essentially how the main trade flows go. And the import embargo simply says that, now Russia cannot sell oil to the EU. So what it's left with is essentially selling oil to China and India mainly. This has two effects. One is that they will need to ship that a much further route, and I'm going to show you a map soon. And that India and China, they get a much stronger bargaining position in the price that they're going to pay for Russian oil. So what we see here is a, it's a map of the world, but or the part of the world, but in particular, what we see is the eastern and the western parts of the Russian production system of oil. So the Russian production system is essentially split in the middle, and most of the oil has, due to infrastructure, has to come out either through the Black Sea or the Baltic Sea. Then there is smaller flows going to the east. That's called the ESPO price oil. So this is what it looked like before the war. Most of the oil going to the west was going to Europe, where there was shipping took roughly a week. Then EU imposed its import embargo and said we're not going to buy it. So then Russia has to ship that much further. We're talking order of magnitude between 2 weeks and up until a month and a half instead of 1 week. So that's substantial. And we can see then on what effect this had on the two aspects: the price that Russia got and the length of the distance. So the black line is the discount on Russian oil. The orange line is the transport distance that Russia transports its oil. And this is the invasion. So we see there's a jump in the transport distance. Russia has to ship its oil much further. And there's a sharp increase in the discount on Russian oil. This is the embargo that started in the beginning of December 22. And we see again an increase in the distances that Russia has to send its oil, and an increase in the discount. I'm going to come back to why it seems to be falling afterwards. So what are we talking about? Just to get an idea of the sizes here. So looking at these distances and taking costs of shipping, we're talking about around 60 million US dollars per day in the first year of losses to Russia. And that's roughly 1% of their GDP. For reasons I'm going to come back to, these numbers are much lower today. I mean, essentially, it's because Russia has its own tankers. So today it might be, half of that, but still, it's a substantial amount of money. All right, here. Now to the price cap. So what we see in the blue line is the production cost of Russian oil. It's all the Russian oil fields. The cheapest ones are to the left, and then in increasing cost, going from the left to right. So this is what economists like me are going to say is a marginal cost curve. Then on top of that, we put the world price. I just put it there around 90. And essentially, Russia is going to produce until its cost is equal to the world price. So this is normal times, and the space between the black line and the blue line is Russia's profits. Then we impose a price cap. So if the price cap is working, that means that we just reduce Russia's profits margins by quite a lot. One thing we can see also is because the costs are so steep there, it has no effect on its production. Russia is going to produce, roughly the same amount with the cap or without the cap. This also means that there's not going to be any effect on the world oil price because there's not going to be a reduction in production. The main winners due to this price cap is India and China, because what we essentially are doing is that we're helping them negotiate a lower price on Russian oil. So we're keeping Russian oil on the market, but they're selling it for a much lower price, and this is quite painful. What would happen if we lower the price cap by, say, $5 per barrel to 55? Well, that would, be if the price cap was well functioning, which it isn't anymore. It would be, ballpark half a percent to 1% of Russia's GDP. So what can Russia do against these things? So before the war and in the beginning of the war, Russia has been threatening on cutting its export. So this is one option that it can do. We investigate this, and we find that in normal times, before any invasion or anything, it would actually be beneficial for Russia to cut its export by around 10%. That would be its net beneficial for itself, but it wouldn't be good for China and India because they are the ones buying it. Now, under the price cap, this kind of threat of cutting exports is actually less likely. Why? Well, because cutting the export has the benefit of increasing the price. So Russia could gain cutting exports, increasing the price. But under a price cap, it doesn't get that effect because it pays, it doesn't get more than the price cap if the price cap is working. And what we find is that for Russia to cut its exports as a sort of retaliation to our price cap, it would need to value harming the EU and the oil importers equally as much as it values its own direct profits. So does that make it likely that they're going to do it or not? Well, you can judge yourself if you think what weight Russia would put on harming importers. But that's roughly the ballpark of how they would need to care about it. What we should know is that if we lower the price cap, this kind of retaliation becomes more likely because Russia is making less money from its oil and it's more beneficial to us. Okay, as cutting exports in order, to somehow circumvent or retaliate against an import embargo is not very likely. It wouldn't work very well, and it would mainly harm China and India. So that's not particularly likely that it would do it. Now to the big question, the real retaliation or the real counter move, I would say, and that's the buying of tankers. So the way the price cap is organized, like others have said, is that it's built on having control over the tanker market. So if Russia owns or has access to its own tankers, then it can circumvent the price cap. So it's good for Russia to take control of the tanker market. The same has to do with the import embargo. The more tankers that Russia has access to, the cheaper it's going to be for it to transport its oil, because it can pressure the price. So Russia has a strong incentive in taking control of the tanker market. So let's try to get a picture of how the sanctions have been. So this is the same graphs that we saw earlier. It was the transport distance and the discount on Russian oil. What we have here is an indication of the cost of transport. So this requires a little bit of detective work. I'm not going to go into it too much, but you can see this as more like an indication. But what we can see here is that the cost of transport from Russia, the Western ports, to say India, can differ from say $1 to $2 in normal times to maybe $10 or $5 per barrel if it's expensive for them. And this is a lot of money. So here we see the invasion, and the costs of transport, they went up a lot at the invasion. The import embargo, again, may force Russia to pay a lot for its transport. And so essentially the embargo, as I said, means that Russia has to transport its oil longer. The price cap is helpful because it makes transport more expensive per barrel. What happened then? Well, Russia started buying tankers, or buying in the sense of accessing, making sure that it can access more tankers. And what we see is that the cost of transport goes down, and that the discount on Russian oil goes down as well. So this is a double loss. I think we lost our eye on the ball here. We had to keep an eye on the tanker market, and we didn't. What happens here when the cost of shipping goes up again? Well, this is a little bit early to say, but it could be that the Greek shipping companies said that they would not transport Russian oil again. So it makes a big difference what tankers Russia has access to. It's a lot of money. So if having more tankers helps Russia evade the price cap, lowering it, increasing its price by $10 per barrel, that's 1.5% of Russia's GDP. If it can get cheaper transport of $5 per barrel, that's 0.5% of Russia's GDP. So even these seemingly small things, like what tankers it has access to, it means a lot in terms of the harms to Russia. Okay, so going forward, what do we need to think about? Well, based on what I said, there's a few things. First of all, we need to take control of the tanker market. We've, to some extent, lost part of the control already, but we should not sell tankers to Russia or its allies. We should not repair their tankers, and we should not allow them to enter our ports. We could consider shutting down the Danish Straits. That would mean for uninsured tankers, maybe, or for all Russian tankers. That would make it very difficult to export oil. Of course, it would be almost like a nuclear bomb to do such a thing. So we need to think about what counter moves are. Today, due to the loss of the tanker market, the price cap has less bite than originally. But the good thing about it is that it reinforces the import embargo. So regarding the price cap, we have to keep it. We should consider lowering it. And for sure, we have to start enforcing it in the paperwork, checking that they have the right insurance, etc. The import embargo is probably the currently most important sanctions that we have. So that's, we just continue with it. And we should extend it to gas and LNG. That would have similar effects as for oil. Russia would need to sell its gas to somewhere else. It would be expensive for them to transport it, and they would get a bad price for it. When we do that, we have to take control of the LNG tanker market together with it. So not lose this, the eyes on that ball again. Then, of course, we have demand side policies, reduce the energy consumption. When we do that, we lower the price of oil globally, and that means less money for Russia. And supply side policies is to increase our energy production. When we do that, the price of oil and gas goes down, Russia makes less money. Those are the things I wanted to say.